Well, we're in the middle of a series called Web of Comparison, and this is the final message in that series of Web of Comparison. And so I'm glad you're here. If you've not been here and have heard the previous two, encourage you to go online. You can catch those messages on. Really, this message will make a lot of sense as you watch those messages and kind of get the context of where we're going. I want to tell you a quick story. There was a 93-year-old woman that was set up on a blind, or I'm sorry, let me restart over. Let's start that over. There was an 83-year-old woman that was set up on a blind date with a 93-year-old man. And they went on their date, and he dropped her off at the door, and she came into her daughter's house where she lived and looked visibly upset. And the daughter's like, "Mom, what's wrong?" And she goes, "I had to slap him 3 times. And the daughter's like, "Are you serious? He got fresh with you that many times?" "No, I thought he was dead 3 times. I had to slap him to wake him up." Oh, okay. Some of you forget you got to do the fake laugh, right? Well, we're in this series called Web of Comparison. And so if you have notes and you're not taking notes, I encourage you to take notes. And if you decided not to take notes, just write this down. We're going to talk about a parable that many of you have heard before. And before I do that, I want to kind of go back into this whole idea of comparison. There is no win in comparison. Have you found that to be true? After the last few weeks, how many have noticed how bad it actually is? You know it was like when you heard the message, you kind of did that, but then after you heard it, you were like living through the week, you're like, "Oh man, I do it like it's like a drug. I'm almost addicted to it. I'm always looking over the left at all those who don't have what I have, don't have the that I have, or I'm looking over the right where all these people have and I'm finding myself either feeling better about myself, more superior than I should, or feeling less better about myself." Somebody came up to me this last week and they said, "You know what they have a problem with?" They mentioned, "I really have a problem with comparing myself to my previous self, of who I was before. Then I was skinnier, smoother, younger, and hairier." Some cases, less hairier. Now, but you were also poorer, dumber, immaturer, and crazier, right? Now you're wrinklier, fatter, hairlesser, or slower. But you're richer, wiser, mature, and influencer. So even when you compare yourself to what you were, there's no win in comparison. There's no final destination. There's no final satisfaction. How do you win? Because in reality, everything's a myth. Everything you see in other people is what they want you to see about them. You don't see what they don't want you to see. Now, everybody dreams about surviving in a place where you can be absolutely transparent and nobody contributes to that vision. Boy, is it quiet in here, or is it? Do I got to be like that 83-year-old woman and see if you're alive this morning? Do you know what I mean? We all want transparency. That's what we say. We don't like all the masks and all of but none of us want to risk rejection. So we try to present something that we want everyone to see about us. Now, there are 2 verses we've been using in this series, and we'll take a look at them. 2 Corinthians and 10:12 in the Message. Sorry about this on the screen. You have that screen to look at, though. We're not, understand, putting ourselves in a league with those who boast that they're our superiors. We're not putting ourselves in a league with those who think that they're better than us, or really that we're in a league where we think we're better than other people. Somebody asked me this last week. They said, you walk around a lot. Like you come down and you walk, you back up. Very simply, I have, just like Shelby, I have a Fitbit, and I do about 2,000 steps of service. Just so you know, I'm getting some exercise in while I do that. 3 services, that's 6,000 steps. So, no, that's not why I do it. But I thought it was funny. Apparently it wasn't. Okay, now I'm lost. Can you believe that? So here's this sense of we feel we're better or we want to be better than the next person, right? That is absolutely set up in the economy of Satan. The desire to be superior is a satanic characteristic, and yet it's in every one of us. Okay? Where did we see it first? Where did we first see the desire to be superior? We saw it when in Ezekiel, where it talks about Satan said, I want to rise to be superior even to God. There was something in Satan himself, Lucifer himself, that caused him, and God had to take him, it's the Bible says, and he says he took 1/3 of the angels and Lucifer and cast them to earth. There was something in Lucifer himself that wanted to be superior because it never ends. If you run the race of wanting to be superior, it will only lead you to the throne of God, and you'll say, I want to be God. You think I'm kidding? There are people today that says we are God. I am my own master. In fact, there are Christians that have made that exact statement, I am my own boss. And then God walked in the room. Maybe not totally my boss. He is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. That's what the Bible says. And it's when we understand that He is superior to all things, and we understand that and we look to Him, we'll find security in us. You know, the reason we compare so much is because we are so insecure. We're insecure. We're not sure about ourselves. We're not sure if I'm good enough. We're not sure if I add up enough. We're not sure if I have what it takes. And so we look at everyone around us because we want to, if I'm just, and some of us in the room say, if I'm in the middle, if I'm better than some and lesser than some, then I'm okay with that. And even that is not good. Because you're comparing to try to determine if even you're okay just in that spot you're at. And God is wanting to shake you out of the web, because when a fly flies into a spider web, the harder he works, the more he gets entangled. And the harder you work in comparison, the more you get entangled in comparison. You really have to come to the Father and you have to say, God, I need your help. I need your help. I've messed this up. I need your help. It goes on and says, we wouldn't dare do that. I love how Paul says that. We wouldn't dare do that. But in all this comparing, grading, and competing, they quite miss the point. And the point is, nobody is better than anyone else. So you can turn to the person next to you and just go, I'm not better than you. I'm not better than you. Right? None of you want to do that. You're all, right? None of us are better than anyone else. Some of you, you're looking, and we go into a situation, we want to leave that situation. It's just this natural reaction of, they're good, but I got more. They're okay, they're good, but I got more. Right? How many find that's true? How many are embarrassed to admit that you found that was true? Right? Raise your hand. You're embarrassed to admit. How many of you have a problem with lying and you just exercised that in the last 30 seconds? Just raise your hand. Right? Right? Here's the next verse. Galatians. Make a careful exploration of who you are. And I mentioned this before. Most people have no idea who they are. But it says, make a careful exploration of who you are and the work you've been given. We do a class called Shape. It's a class called Shape. And many people won't even go to Shape because they don't see how knowing who they are will help with anything. You need to know who you are. You need to understand how you're made, how you're created. Wednesday night, when you see that, it's Shape, S-H-A-P-E. Okay, that's how you spell shape if you didn't know. And it's a class based on those 5 premises you need to take in Wednesday nights. But it will help you understand who you are. And then sink yourself into that. Don't be impressed with yourself. Don't compare yourself to yourself. Don't compare yourself with others. Look at what it says later. It says, each of you must take responsibility for doing the creative best you can with your own load. Your load isn't someone else's load. My load isn't Richard's load. My load isn't Darren's load. Don't look at what everyone else is doing. Look at what God has given you to do and do your best with what you do. Because it's a myth. If you look at someone else and you see how great they're doing, do you ever notice we always compare our real life with other people's real life? We compare, look at this. We tend to compare our real life with their real life, their highlight reel. We look at everything they got going for them and how great it is and how wonderful it is, but we're not in their house. We're not in their workplace. You can come to church on a Sunday and see someone sitting there and they smell so good. They look so good. Their kids, they seem to act like, that's because they got drugged before they came in. They gave them a sedative. And, when they're at home, they're just as bad as your kid. But they had the money to, drug them up. And they're, why are my kids so crazy? So are theirs. We look at all the highlight reel of their life, and then we compare and we look, my life's a mess. My family's a mess. And people say, yeah, my family has just got drama. We're a dysfunctional family. Well, join the crowd. Everyone in here has a dysfunctional family. And usually the person talking about having a dysfunctional family is the most dysfunctional. Right? And we'll sit there. There are times we'll sit there and we'll hear and we'll listen to someone and they'll talk about how dysfunctional something is in their marriage or their kids or whatever. And they're sitting, and that person's sitting there going, yeah, I'm better than that. No, you're not. Because you're not better than anyone else in this room. You see, but that's what happens. Because there's something in us that we don't necessarily control. We didn't try to feel that way. It comes. And when it comes, you have to take it captive. And it's the sense that comes from an insecurity in us. Like, am I good enough? Am I beautiful enough? Am I smart enough? Is this enough? I'm going to show you an illustration that's really going to talk to this. See, the question is what or who am I going to look to as my reference point to tell me that I'm okay? We all have somebody or something we're looking to. And God's saying, all I want you to do, last week in the message, we talked about this. You're a child of God. You're a child of God. And Jesus says, look right here. Look right here. Last week we talked about that when my daughter they come to me and they'll say something that they saw, or Mackenzie came to me one time and I've told you this story when she says, Dad, I'm dumb. Well, I said, who told you were dumb? The reason she thought she was dumb was because she was comparing herself to other people. It's quite simple. If you grew up in a small town where there wasn't a great pool of talent for sports, you could be the best baseball player in that team. But if you go to another place where there's and you feel really good, real confident about being the best baseball player in that, because you're the best one on that team, you're confident. The moment you step into another place, bigger pool of talent, lots of kids, and you end up being the worst, what happened? It's a myth. When you compare yourself to other people, there's nothing stable to compare yourself to, because we're all moving. There's nothing true. We exaggerate and we lie because we don't want other people to think we're worse than them. Now, you're all looking at me like, not me. How many know we've done it? How many have done that before? Right? Take your cue about who you are from the one who made you, the one who loved you, and the one who redeemed you. If you're going to look at anyone, when my daughters, they come to me, one of the things I say, now look at me. If you could just see what I see. You're all worked up about this thing, but if you could see what I see as your dad, how many parents have said that to your kids? If you could see, the Father God is sitting there looking at you right now saying, I know you're looking at this, but if only you could see what I see. Right here, I love you. You are enough. You know why? Because I made you. I made you. I created you just the way you are. You know what Satan tries to do? Satan's attempt is to get you to turn your contempt toward God. See, once you understand that you were created by God, he wants you to turn your ungrateful heart toward God and say, God, you're holding out on me. Can I tell you something? God never held out on you. He's not holding out on you today. Ever. Satan wants you to look at him and say, if you had just done this for me, if you had given me that, if you had made me as good, then it would be better. And God's like, well, I'll tell you right now, I love you whether you did better or not. I love you just the way you are. I want to use this illustration, and it's important to understand that in verses. I'm going to give you some verses first. Proverbs 14:30, look at this. Envy will rot your bones. When you look to people around you and you wish you had what they had, that envy will come in. It will rot your bones. It will make you a bitter person. How many have ever met a person, as they've gotten older, they got really bitter, and they were like the old crotchety man that no one wanted, and kids would like ring the doorbell and run away and watch some old guy come, right? I never did that. But I saw people do that. I would never do that. That's not in me. What gets a person to that place where they're just angry at life, they're upset about everything? What gets a person so just inside tormented that they just become angry to anybody? What gets a person to that place? Envy rots your bone. Envy is one of the things that can bring you to that place where it rots you because you just feel like you never have enough and you always want what everyone else. You have this thought, if I just had what they had, I'd be better. Here's the next one, James 3:16 says this, for where you have envy and selfish ambition, there you will find disorder and every evil practice. Look at the next verse. In Job, resentment kills a fool and envy slays the simple. Envy is terrible. It's poison. And when we compare ourselves to other people, what are we doing? We are envying what they are or what they have. Very important to stop. That's what envy is. Wanting what we don't currently have, but wanting what other people have. Now, today I'm going to look at a parable in Matthew 25. I'm going to give you just a description of parable. Parable is a story that has a point. It makes a point. Jesus wants to make a point. He starts the parable, really almost every parable, with this saying, the kingdom of heaven is like. Notice it's not the kingdom of earth is like. What Jesus is saying, I came from heaven in the form of a baby. I've been in heaven, and I'm here to tell you what it's like in heaven. So, for instance, Becky here's got a I Love Hawaii shirt. How many people have never been to Hawaii in this room? Okay, that's a lot of people that have never been to Hawaii. Okay, you've been to Hawaii? Becca, you've been to Hawaii? Yes. Okay. So Becca's been to Hawaii. Becca could come up here and she could tell you a parable about Hawaii. She could go, the kingdom of Hawaii is like. And you'd all sit there and go, well, we've never been there, so we don't know what it's like. But she's been there and she can tell you what it's like. That's what Jesus was doing in parables. He was saying, you've never been there, but I want to tell you what the kingdom of heaven's like. In Matthew 25, he does a series of parables. Sometimes he would explain them, sometimes he won't. But in Matthew 25, he goes back to back to back to back, telling stories without ever stopping to describe what those parables were about. Now, we're going to take a look at this parable that maybe you've heard of before, the parable of the talents. We're going to call it the parable of the bags because it talks about money bags. And it really is a parable on money, but it relates to so much more than just money. So let's look at Matthew 25, verse 14. It says, again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants, and look at this word right here, entrusted his property to them. So there is a master, and there are 3 servants, okay? So I need 3 servants to come on up here. They don't know they were going to be called on today. Darren knew he was coming. Jason and Edgar, you're right there at the edges. We'll have you come stand right up here in any particular order. Okay, there is a master that is his kingdom. He has no hugging. Yeah. So there is a master. Are they doing some? And he has property. He's a very wealthy man. Look what it says up there. And he entrusts. First it says who called his servants. Called. We, those who are saved, have been called, every one of us. And he entrusted his property to them. Did he give them the property? No, he entrusted it to them, okay? Now look at the next verse. It says, to one, he gave 5 bags. Right there, okay? 5 bags of money. He entrusted, it says he gave him 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, to another 2 talents, and to another he gave 1 talent. And you all got a reason why he got 1 talent by his actions earlier, right? Okay? You got to keep your eye on him, and it's not hard. Okay, the one with 5 has a lot. There's a lot going for him. He's got a lot of stuff, the master entrusts him with a lot because he just sees a lot of the things in him that he can give 5 to. If you're a business owner, you do this. You don't find the most dysfunctional person in your staff and give them the most responsibility, right? You give the one to the person you think that have those things there. And then you have the person with 2 right there, and he gives it to them, and then the one with 1, because this is God the master, and he believes in every single person. Even the most broken, he sees potential in. Okay? So he gives it 1. Okay? Now look at the next verse. You have to see yourself in this too. The master is God. Okay? And then you're one of the 3 servants. Now let's say you're 2. Let's say you're the 2 beggar. Okay? So you just turn it, I'm the 2 beggar. You just say, I'm a 2 beggar. Right? Everyone in here say, I'm a 2 beggar. Right? And some of you got 2 bags to prove it right here. They just 2 bags, that just hang down. Here, I'm definitely a 2 beggar right here. Okay? And why would I say we're 2 beggars? Because you have more than some, or less than some, and more than others. Okay? So it's kind of that place where we have less than some or more than others. Okay? Now look at Matthew 25, 16 through 18. It says, the man who had received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work. And what did he do? He gained 5 more, right? So also the one with 2 talents gained 2 more. Did the same thing. He went immediately, put it to work. Now look at this next verse. But the man who received 1 talent went off. Now, this is when the music changes. Jesus is telling the story, And it's like, the 5 went out and got 5 more, and it do-do-do. Then the guy with 1 went out, he dug a hole, and he stuck it in. And everybody listening to the story says, this is not going to end well for guy number 1 beggar. Right? It ain't going to end well. Now, it goes on, and here's the reality. The guy with 1 bag is sitting there and he's saying, listen, look at him with 5. If I had 5 bags, then I could do something. Sure, even if I had 2, then I could go out and do what they did. But I got 1. Just 1. What do I got? I don't got anything. I'm just a 1-bagger. So he'll get all the credit because he's got 5 bags and he goes out and does it. Bigger. And even 2-bagger. And the 1-bagger guy, he gets, can you just see him getting upset because apparently he didn't entrust me with 1. So here's an example. Jason's going, well, why didn't he give me 5 bags? Why did he say I only had 1 bag? And Edgar's looking at Darren going, Darren's got 5 bags? He's from Houston. How is he getting 5 bags? I lived here in Minneapolis. I should be the 5-bagger. Why didn't he give me the 5-bagger? You know, it's obvious I should have had more than Jason, but I should have had more than Darren, right? And we all sit there and we complain about what we've been given. We all complain about the situation. Yeah, if I had had that family, then I could have ended up far better than the family. But I got this one, and look at how I'm bad, and I end up this way because of my family. You only gave me 1 bag. You gave them to sure. So you can expect that from them because they got right. Look at this. Look at the next verse. After a long time, next verse, after a long time, which means after a lifetime. After a lifetime, and it goes on, it says, after a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. In other words, he's saying, what did you do with what you had? Goes on in verse 20, it says, the man who had received 5 bags of gold brought another 5. Master said, you entrusted me, and that's a key part of this verse. You entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See, I have gained 5 more. You know what the guy with 5 bags was saying right here? The guy with 5 bags was saying, is he here yet? 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 I can't wait until he gets back because I got him. I want to show him what I've done with the 5 bags. Is he here yet? When is he coming? Is he going to come yet? He's looking for the return of the master because he's been faithful with what he's been given. Then the same happened for the 2. And it says, he makes the statement, he says, you entrusted me with 5 bags of gold. See what I've done. It goes on and he says, in verse 21, he says, the master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with few things. He had the most. He had the most of everyone. You see, we think because someone has a little more talents and abilities than us or has something more than us, that it's way more than that. And Jesus refers to it, it's not as much as you think. He says, you've been faithful in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share in your master's happiness. He says, now I'm going to put you in charge of many things. Come and share. You can go have a seat. Will you give him a hand? Because he was so faithful with 5 bags. He is the prize child today. And then Edgar said, I've taken your 2 and I've made 2 more. And it says, you know what? You well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in a little. I'm going to give you charge over much. Enter my happiness. And so, Edgar, he goes, enter my you will never be more happy than when you're using what God has given you. You can have a seat.
Thank you.
Now, where's that 3rd guy? Where's that 3rd guy? You know where the 3rd guy is? He's out trying to figure out where he buried that treasure. I know I stuck it somewhere over here. He's like, and I'm so stinking tall, it's hard to see that far down to the ground, right? And he's walking around, and I come up and I said, what are you looking for? And the bag of money. I'm like, what do you mean the bag of, what did you do with the bag? And he says, I dug a hole, and I stuck it in the hole. I'm like, you're kidding, right? And he's sitting there, he says, in a way, it's kind of your fault. That's what he's thinking to Master. Can you hear him? He's sitting there and he goes, in a way, it's kind of your fault. You only gave me one bag. If you give me 2 bags or 5 bags, then I could have done more with it. You only gave me 1 bag. What did you expect? Some of you feeling a little close to home here? The man with 2 bags of gold had that happen, and then Matthew 24 or 25:24 says this. Then the man who had received one bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew you were a hard man, harvesting where you had. Notice what he did not start with. The other 2 men started with this. You've entrusted to me. And this man says, it's you. You're a hard man. You're the problem. You're the fault. It was you that caused me not to do this. It was you that put me in this position. It was you. You're a hard man. And we point our finger at God and say, God, you're the problem. In verse 25, he said, so I was afraid and went out, hid your gold in the ground. See, here's what belongs to you. And he hands back the gold that the Lord had given him. Exactly what it was. The guy with 5 didn't come back and say, I knew you were a hard man. The guy with 5 says, I'm going to take what you've entrusted me and use it. And you know what God did? He entrusted more to him. The guy with 2, he said, I'm not complaining. I got 2. Praise God. I'm going to take what I received and I'm going to use it. And God blessed him with more. It was the one. Now listen, God was not, this master, and I got to say this master because this is a story. The master was not upset that he had failed. The master was upset that he had done nothing with what he had been given. He had done nothing with what he's been given. So the master replied, you wicked and lazy servant. You knew that I harvested where I had not sown and gathered where I have not scattered seed. And by the way, wicked here can also mean in the Aramaic worthless. You worthless and lazy servant. All you needed to do was put it in the bank and maybe get a deposit off or interest off of your deposit. That would have been something. You could have at least done that, but you did nothing. He goes on in Matthew 25:28 says, so take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who had 10. And any business owner would do that. If somebody was failing, they would take what that person had that was failing and they would take it and give it to the one who was actually using it. Goes on, and he says, throw that worthless servant into the darkness where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. So I'm going to... Okay, we won't throw him into anything this morning, or I'll be weeping and gnashing teeth. Most people think that they're talking about hell, but this isn't talking about hell. This is talking about regret. I missed the opportunity. Some of you think, because it's a parable about money, and if it was hell, it would be like, you mean if I mismanage my money, I'm going to hell? Some of you are like, I'm in trouble. Help me. Dave Ramsey, where are you? Help me. Right? Now, this is talking about regret. He's saying because he did not use what he was given, he missed the opportunity to be part of the master's circle. Now, you can have a seat. We won't throw you out just yet. No, don't applaud him. We don't want to celebrate that kind of behavior. No. Are you with me this morning? If someone's sleeping next to you, wake them up because this is the main point of this message right here. Okay? Hello, good morning. Here's the main point. You look at it right here. Here it is on the screen. The main point this morning is what you have is less important than what you do with what you have. Most people determine how good they are based on what they have. And I mean, if you're anyone, you know people who've become successful business people or failed in business. Or people who had nothing and made huge, they went from rags to riches or went from riches to rags. And the reality is we look at people and we look at what they have, and what we say is you were successful because look at everything you have in your bank account or what you have. You were successful rather than looking at what they're doing with what they have. I want to illustrate that because we all have something. Every one of us in this room have something. Every one of us in this room have something, but the attitude and how we approach it is what you have to take a look at. Are you always looking at everyone else saying, if I had had their freedom, if I had had their things, then I would do more with what I have? You see, here's the reality. We have all been given, we are all bookshelves. You're all a bookshelf, you know that? And in your bookshelf, inside of you, you have a measure of each of these things you see on the bookshelf. We all have a measure of money. We all have a network of friends and people that we know. We all have a measure of that. We all have vision. We all have dreams, things that we would love to see happen, some of which we believe will happen or not. We have a measure of family. We have a measure of education, time. We're all a measure of time. We have health. And a measure of health. Hobbies. We all have a measure of hobby. They're tools and skills that we've been given, that we have. We have jobs and careers. Here, right here, we have that thing. There's something about us that's unique to us. That thing that makes us different from people. There's something about each of us that causes us to be unique. And that's whatever that is in your life. And then we all have a story. You know what's great about the story? It's why I saved it last. Is God wrote your story before one day ever began. You know what's amazing to me? Is God's asking you to do something that you don't think you're capable of doing, but God knew the story before He created you. And the reality is He didn't create you and then said, well, maybe we can make them work in this situation. God created, He looked at the issue, He looked at what He needed written, He wrote the story, and then He created a perfect solution to the story. And that's who you look at in the mirror every day. With your weaknesses and strengths, you are the perfect solution to God's story and this greater story that He's writing. We're all characters in the story. We are all in the credits. And one day when we get to heaven, there won't be a big movie screen that's running all of the stuff we did. Some of us think when I get to heaven, they're going to tell all of the bad things I did when I get to heaven, and I'm going to be embarrassed. I'd rather be naked in front of a bunch of people than to see everything I did, right? No, that's not going to be heaven. What will be in heaven when the story of history plays, your name will be in the credits because God had a story, and your story was part of that whole history of earth. See, when you compare yourself to what other people are doing, you're missing the point. And the point is, if you do what they're doing, you'll mess it all up. Just do what God has asked you to do. Carry your load to the best of your ability. God is the one who stocked your shelf. He's the one that gave you every measure, every one of these things. God's the one that stocked your bookshelf. Stop looking over your left shoulder at their bookshelf and at the right shoulder and looking at their bookshelf and saying, God, if you had only stocked my shelves with that, God said you would have been messed up. It's like a conversation. Imagine a conversation. God, if only you had given me enough of that on my bookshelf. And God goes, wait a minute. If I had done that, you wouldn't be anything of what I wanted you to be. You are perfectly the person I want you to be right now. You have all the gifts. He said the question is not whether or not you have enough on your shelf. The question is your attitude about what you have on your shelf. The first two, God, you entrusted to me property. You entrusted to me the network that I have and the vision I have. You've entrusted to me the time and the career and the hobbies that I have. You entrusted them to me, Lord. Help me to use them. I'm not looking to the left or the right to see what they're doing with their bookshelves. I'm more concerned with what I'm doing with my bookshelf. And how am I using my bookshelf to affect lives around me? To touch people. This is all about people you've never met. That you've never met before. When you go to prayer meeting, it's always about me. It's always about me. I'm going to pray about my needs. Rather than praying about people I've never met yet. And God, help me to use my bookshelf, my measure of items in my life. I don't care if it's more or less than the person to the right or the left of me. I want to use my bookshelf to the best of my ability. Or I can be the one who had one bag of money and said, I know you're a hard taskmaster. I'm going to bury it in the ground and do nothing. You know what he said? You could have at least deposited it, and it would have gotten some interest, and I wouldn't have had to kick you out of the circle.
Yeah, that's true.
Some of us just buried it. You know what? Some of you need to deposit your bookshelf and allow God to use you, naturally just use you, where maybe you're not pursuing it. If you don't want to pursue it yet, and you don't understand why you should, at least deposit it. Be willing to say, God, whatever it is you want to do, I'll do that. There are two simple ideas in this series. I'm going to share two simple ideas with you, and then I'm going to tell you a story. We're going to close. First simple idea I've told in the first two was take your cue from the one who made you, the one who loves you, and the one who redeemed you. Look to him, look to God, and say, God, what do you think about me? You can't lie. Here's the second idea. Celebrate what God has given others and leverage what God has given you. Celebrate what God has given others. So when someone gets promoted or someone gets a big sale or someone gets an award for doing something great, genuinely go up to them and say, I'm excited with you. Can I celebrate with you what God has done in your life? How you've been entrusted. You were entrusted. You did something and now you're getting more in return. You're bringing a return. I'm going to celebrate with you while leveraging who you are. The reason we cannot celebrate is because we buried our own bookshelf and we don't want anyone else to do anything but bury theirs. I can't believe Pastor brought up that person and told the story about how they won someone to Christ. If they knew how she really was behind the scenes, he wouldn't be celebrating her for doing that. You know, it's literally we have become such an insecure society. You can almost never celebrate somebody for doing something great out of fear that someone else will get so angry that you pointed out their successes, but you didn't tell what I do. When you're insecure, you need people to acknowledge everything you're doing. You need people to appreciate everything. I need them to say, so-and-so did this, and I did this, and I did that. We need people to celebrate who I am. Rather, when you're secure, whether people celebrate you or not, all you care about is whether Christ is celebrating you. You know who you are. Let me tell you this story, and I'll close. Joel Osteen, I don't know if you've heard of him or not. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. I don't know if you've heard of him at all, but I think he's from Houston. I'm told he has a big church. I'm not sure if he does or not. I'm kidding, I know. You're all sitting there going, well, you're not as good of a pastor as Joel Osteen is. Right? No. Joel Osteen dropped out of college. He is a college dropout. Let's close and pray. No, Joel Osteen dropped out of college. And, I knew him from a kid. I knew the whole Osteen family when I was a kid because when we were kids growing up, there were two preachers we'd listen to all the time, John Osteen, Joel's father, and Jimmy Swaggart. The two of them we'd listen to all the time growing up as kids. And Joel Osteen dropped out of college. And he said, Dad, all I really want to do is edit your preaching videos. That's all I want to do. I don't want to do anything. I don't need to go to college for that. All I want to do is edit your preaching videos. Joel tells this story. I'm basically telling you the story he's told. And he did that for 17 years in a dark room. He would edit John Osteen's sermons. And one day, while he was in the back, his dad got sick. And he called Joel and said to Joel, you're going to have to preach today. And this Sunday. And Joel's like, I can't preach. He says, yes, you can. You're going to have to preach. He says, but I don't even know how to write a sermon. He says, that's okay, Joel. Go find a sermon that I've preached that you've enjoyed and then re-preach it. Well, a few days later, Joel calls John and says, I've listened to all your messages and I don't like any of them. And he says, well, find one that you kind of like and preach that one. So Joel found one he kind of liked and he tried to preach his dad's message. Well, of course he did terrible. In fact, you could probably find one of his that message online. I'm sure you can find anything online anymore. But it was terrible. And because he's John Osteen's son, everybody just wanted to encourage him. Great message, Joel. Joel's like, thank you, knowing it was terrible, right? I've often told staff, if a lot of people come up to you and tell you how great your message was, it was a train wreck. And they feel bad for you. They want to encourage you so you don't shoot yourself. I give up. Well, he preached the message that first time. And the following week, his father died. And the football was passed. The baton was passed. He said, Joel, you're the guy. He's like, I was only going to preach once, but now So he went through and he started preaching his dad's sermons. And they were terrible. He said, until one time it occurred to me that I'm not John Osteen. I'm Joel Osteen. And that's his bookshelf, and this is my bookshelf. And it wasn't until he became secure in who he was, because how could a video editor ever pastor a church? And I'm sure the enemy just played that over and over and over and over and over again. Who are you to try to take over for the great John Osteen? And Joel says it wasn't until I became comfortable with who I was that things changed. Now, whether you agree with John Osteen or not doesn't much matter. That's who he is. Whether you like his style or don't like his style, it doesn't matter. It's who he is. And there are a lot of people who attack you for just being who you are. Do you know something? I'm James Biffert. That's who I am. And in 22 years of ministry, I've had plenty of, I almost said it, well, I'll say it, old ladies tell me how I should be more like them. But guess what? If God wanted them to pastor, he would have put them in that place. For some reason, he put me here, and he created me just the way I am. Do I always understand that? No. But it's who I am. Can I tell you something? I can tell you how to do a lot of the things in your life, and you can try to compare yourself to my life and say, I need to be more like this, and I need to be, you know, you need more like is Christ, first of all, not like me, but more like Christ. But listen to this. I could never do what you do with the way you do it, because your bookshelf is your bookshelf. And God has put us in places in life to just be who we are. Does that mean we won't grow? No, I assure you this. If you pursue Christ, everything you need to grow in, you will grow in. Because He does the work in you without you even trying. Because you have a Christ nature. His burden is light. Ours is heavy. He says, give me your burden and I'll give you my burden. Just be Cheryl. Someone asks you to speak in school for something, conference, whatever. Someone asks you to do something that scares you. Say, okay, God, this scares me to death. But if you've entrusted to me this opportunity, I must have the measure that I need of my bookshelf to meet the need. And I'd tell you, whether it's great or not, it will meet a need. Amen? Will you bow your heads?